Good morning, everyone. Well, it's my first time here, so it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me here. Well, today, as Bart mentioned, I'm gonna present a little bit some of the main findings and some of the main recommendations that we had after this study that we conducted at Create. So Bart, I was part of this study with Bart and Chris, but also with Victoria Stobel from the University of Liverpool, and this study was commissioned by Creative Commons, so it was a really nice opportunity to work together. And the main idea was that what the methodology, in terms of methodology, what we did was we decided for a multiple case study. So we cover 16 cultural heritage institutions in the UK, EU, US, and Brazil. So 4 of each jurisdiction, and covering also different categories of cultural heritage institutions. So for example, galleries, museums, archives, and libraries. And the main research question was whether open licenses could offer a financially sustainable alternatives for CHIs, for cultural heritage institution, navigating these funding challenges. Because as we know, the costs to run, for example, cultural heritage institutions are increasing, but the amount of public funding has decreased in many places. Particularly, we mentioned the UK. And so we decided to analyze that. And one of the things that we wanted to discover and investigate and also provide some better understanding was what models of open license exist among cultural heritage institutions in these jurisdictions, and what circumstances might a cultural heritage institution choose to adopt an open license model, and what advantages and disadvantages to do those institutions experience from adopting open or closed models. So when we were analyzed that, we talked with several institutions. I was responsible to interview the Brazilian ones, and we discovered that based on our analysis of the interviews and also the previous research, we identified 7 main themes of importance for those institutions when they consider or not adopting open licensing models. And then based on that, for example, we analyze how important the adoption of open license model contribute to their public mission, which usually is to provide the broadest and wider access to those their collections, and also some indirect benefits that open license may generate for them. There are also these discussions of how they can save money when they move from a paid license model to a open license model. And then we brought some examples, for example, from the Wales Center for British Art and the Indianapolis Museum of Art, because they mentioned their interview that they used to have a paid license model, but then after, for example, they decided they realized that it was very costly to administer this kind of business, so they decided to move to open license. But then we also analyzed, discussing with some institutions, the cost of implementing open models, because even the way you catalog part of your collections, how you adopt the marks and the license and display, and even the necessity, for example, when talking with the Museum of the Republic in Brazil, they said, like, as part of the some new regulation, they start adopting open license, but they also need to train their personnel, because most of them are archivists, are historians, so they don't have the legal knowledge to do this kind of research. So the other thing was the interoperability with platforms. So we have some people here from when it comes to Wikimedia Commons and other kinds of platforms, not only internal ones like the Polonia from the National Library of Poland, but also some external ones and even commercial ones. Sometimes you have some norms that they have to follow. There are also some they have some other aspects that they have to consider. So this is something they also take into account. And the tracking, so they are always concerned because, for example, when you have paid license model, you usually have licensee agreements, so you know what the user will gonna use that particular work and what will be the purpose, so you can track the use. But when it comes to open license or also even public domain works that are publicly available, it's harder to do this kind of, to track the use. And finally, choosing the appropriate licensing tools. So for example, you have different types of license. We always discuss a lot the Creative Commons ones, but you also have other tools and even the right statements and other options. So sometimes for most of the institutions, it's not very easy for them to decide which one they can adopt and which one would be the most appropriate for their institution. So in terms of recommendations, we provide a few of them. I'm not going through all of them. But then the one that I chose that I thought would be interesting to discuss here with you was to the tracking of follow-on creative users, because this is something that I thought was quite interesting, because we have been discussing here a lot about the public domain and the copyright aspects, and also some people have discussed privacy and data protection issues. So there are all these legal issues that are far from being solved, I guess. But when I was talking with one of the Brazilian institutions, I remember especially the National Library of Brazil and the Museum of Art of São Paulo, they told me, in Brazil, just so you know, in terms of copyright legislation, we are very far from what you have in Europe in terms of limitations and exceptions and everything. But what they told me was, well, it would be great to have a better and clear legal framework that we could use, like even for preservation purposes, and also to comply with to fulfill our mission as a public institution. However, what they said was, we have other bigger issues. We have a lot of financial constraints, we have technical and infrastructure limitations, and all of them, can be quite challenging, and honestly, it doesn't depend on a law reform. And then one of the things that we have discussed is with the National Library of Brazil, they said, well, we really would like to, because we know we have a huge collection, a lot of people are using our collections, but it's very hard for us to track. We have the website analytics, so we know who is visualizing we know a little bit the number of people who visualize some of our works, digitized works. We know also some people who download, we are not able to track the use. And also as a public institution, sometimes it's very hard to argue that you should increase the amount of money they are receiving in terms of public funding. And if they are able to provide evidence that there are a lot of not only cultural benefits and social benefits of those collections being open to the public, but if we could also show that they have commercial value and they are contributing, for example, for the GDP, for the economy of the country, it would be one of the ways to attract more money. So even though it's not the main, maybe the main mission of the cultural heritage institution are not to attract and create like investments and everything, but this is something important at the end, because most of these institutions are struggling financially to fulfill their requirements. So that's one of the things that when we were discussing, one of the ideas in terms of recommendations is to help identify, for example, the cultural heritage institutions, as well as the government could help identify public benefits that could lead to, of these collections, that could lead to indirect income generation, and also more investments in terms of research could help identify new opportunities to capture value from follow-on innovation, enabling, for example, CHIs to achieve their public mission and generate new revenue. And I want to finish my presentation mentioning that I was talking with one of the persons that I interview, and he was saying like, everybody knows that the public mission of a cultural heritage institution is to try to make their collection public and freely and public available as possible. But then he said, there's a bit of a paradox here sometimes, because they need, for example, to generate income from their collection to make it freely and more widely available to the public. So that's why our study also consider all these aspects, this financial interests and how you can generate revenues with open collections. And that's it. Thank you.